I think this is a good segue for me to start this part two of a two-part lesson on paying attention to everyday altars, reflections on a disciplined life. And the reason why I said this is a good way of segueing is that what George has helped us to see is that we often feel that there's a list of things we need to do, right? You have your daily list of errands to run, you have weekly, perhaps, projects to complete, and sometimes we feel that at the end of whatever, 24 hours or a 7-day week, could be an 8-day week, you feel like you've done something. Well, this helps us to see that it's not necessarily getting it done, but rather that love supersedes. That's really why you do certain things, right? And so this gets back to what I've been trying to say in these 2 days, is that when Barbara asked me to share why I am such, in her eyes, a disciplined person. And I said, well, that's interesting that you say that. And so it drew me, as I said last Sunday, into this thoughtful journey for a number of weeks to figure out why I am perceived by at least one person, a disciplined person. And so last Sunday I passed out this handout, and if you brought back what I passed out last Sunday, you don't have to take another one. But if you did not, and some of you are new for the first time, you may take another sheet. I hope to have enough. As I said last Sunday, part one is on the back of this handout. Now we're going to look at part two. This is adult education, which means that you can learn on your own by having a handout, right? Rather than the big pitcher pouring information into a little cup. I believe that we are all teachers and learners at the same time. One of the things that I also pass out, which I ran out of copies last week, is that when I was doing my thinking, I asked myself, why are certain people more perceived as wise with wisdom than others? And so then I went on a Google search and found this Thomas Armstrong's 12 Stages of Human Life Cycle. And again, if you want another copy, you're welcome. I did print out some more. And those of you who were not here last Sunday, you can have a copy. And you'll see that at a certain age is when you begin to acquire, because you have already lived enough years to be able to look back and have a retrospective flashback or opportunity to say, these are the things that have happened. Now, I'm going to say something now because we're going to cover it later, is that I have taken on, as I was saying to Paley this morning, or reclaim the role that I have been perceived for many, many years, and that is being the patriarch of my family. And that assumes a lot of responsibilities that one either say, I don't want, and walk away, or you step into it and you become the patriarch that all of your family members wish and hope that you would undertake. And I want to say to you that one of the things, if anything I want to pass on to you, regardless of where you are on the life's timeline, is that if you find yourself in that role, it is a responsibility that is not just Chinese American, but all human families, okay? So, last Sunday, I tried to help convey to you that God is known and can be experienced by you in everyday occurrences. That there are everyday altars. While we in the small group sharing that we did last Sunday would default back to our wonderful sanctuary across the street. It has symbols, it has a history, it has all kinds of sacred meaning that has been infused over the years, okay? And I highly respect that and honor that. But my point last Sunday is that everywhere we look, if we are open to God's revelation, God is there. So if that is true, which biblically it is true, then it's up to us to be ready and to see the sacred in the secular, to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, right? And there's a book, Curtis, about the cathedral within, written a few years ago, about people building great structures and architecture, and that book is saying, no, the cathedral is within you. You're able to sense God's presence that way too. So while we would like to build wonderful buildings, and even though Nelson's not here, he did the retrofit, and he's proud of that building, and on. There are cathedrals all over the world. Okay, so that being said, I'm not going to say too much about these books that I, again, repeated, but I have copies here for those of you who want to see it. And so on the paying attention handout, on this second side, I try to glean off from Barbara Brown Taylor what it means to be reverence, okay? And according to her definition, reverence is the recognition of something greater than self, something that is beyond human creation or control, that transcends full human understanding. And so when we reverence, using it as a verb, we acknowledge that there is something greater than oneself. And then I started to say, well, why do ordained ministers are called reverend? We're certainly not greater than self or beyond human understanding. And I tried to do research on that. And the only thing that I could come up with, and most of you know the kind of person I am, I would say, it's not that ministers see themselves greater than others, but rather that a minister acknowledges in his or her call to ministry that God is someone greater than oneself. Because we're not God, right? So why would you call us reverend, right? But rather as servants of God, and as one who do profess and declare God's majesty and glory, we deflect. We say, no, God is one who is beyond our understanding. I don't know if Pastor Sebastian would agree with me on that, but I certainly don't want you to see us who are ordained as someone who is beyond understanding. So that being said, then how can we pay attention to everyday altars? How do we pay attention to God's revelation that is happening all around us? And so here are some things that I want to pass on to you. One, I'm now looking at my story. The sun rises to meet me, rather than, oh, it's a great sunrise, claiming that I am the one who makes the sun rise. It's a fine, perceptive point, but it is basically saying we wake up to God. God came to us. It's not that we're trying to find God, which I kind of said that last Sunday too. I think that's something that is so basic for us. You know, I sometimes scare Joy because I often will say, I woke up today and I'm alive. There's a lot of times for me when I open my eyes and I say, hey, I'm still here. I give thanks to God that I'm still alive. I don't know about you, but maybe that just comes because I'm getting older. But it is something that I am thankful for because God has given me another day of living. Okay? Now, secondly, it's God's people. And that's a quote, that reference is a Good Samaritan. It's to pay attention to the people who are, again, God's creation. So I have the practice of walking every day. I give myself one day, which is Sunday, because now that we have returned to the church, I don't have time to walk. I hope to get my 10,000 steps in. But when I walk, I meet people like what I'm saying to you, the Good Samaritan meets people on the road. That's very important. And paying attention takes time. You cannot just walk by people, just like the parable of the Good Samaritan has said to us. I can, more than you, I can say, hey, I'm a Pharisee. I can walk by this person. But we're not asked to do that. So I know a lot of people in Sausalito now. You know, I know Finn, who's an African-American man who lives in Richmond City, who collects trash in Sausalito. Because his hands are so dirty, he always gives me a fist bump. I found out that he's a Christian, and he always calls me pastor. And one day I said, why are you carrying this aluminum trash can on your back? And he said, let me tell you something. There are some people who pay extra to get their trash picked up at their home. They don't take their cans out to the street. And I said, whoa. I said, I take my can out to the street. But, you know, we talk about things like this. There's all kinds of people. I speak to these Jehovah's Witnesses, Peter and Dennis. On Tuesday mornings, they're down in Sausalito, and we always talk about theology. And he knows that I'm a Baptist minister, so they don't try to convert me. I don't try to convert them. But I always stop and I always talk theology. They always talk about Judgment Day, right? The Jehovah's Witness people. And I often quote love, that God doesn't forever condemn people. I said, maybe you don't see that, but the last judgment means that God is going to save everyone. And so they kind of flip their little eyes a little bit, but it's a wonderful experience. In fact, I do this because I'm training for this bigger walk in October, but the point I'm making is that I meet wonderful people on my walk, and it's great. There's this woman with 2 huskies named Elaine, and she's walking, and I walk. And more recently, on Saturday, I walked before I went to Katie's retirement, and I met Ray, who's this Chinese-American young person who's taking a picture of San Francisco. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm doing a 30-second slow, what do you call it, exposure, right? Something like that. And so I showed him some of my pictures on my phone, and he said, that's pretty good, And so it's meeting God's people every day. And it's like this. It takes a lifetime to do this, like water changes stones. Don't expect it to happen right away. But I see myself as kind of like an ambassador to the city. So when I walk by the big hotel, what's the name of the hotel again? Yeah, the Madrona Hotel. There's this guy who's very distinguished looking. He always wears a blue blazer with a beard and a nice mustache, and always waves at me. So one day I went into the Madrona Cafe and I said, I see you every day, you wave at me every day. I said, I gotta meet you. And so his name is Robert, and he's a real estate agent. I thought you were some kind of important guy. No offense to real estate agent persons, but Robert is someone that I always look to the right when I pass the hotel, and Robert is always sitting there, and he's holding court, kind of like. I said, why are you there? He said, well, there's a bunch of us who have coffee every morning, and he invited me to join them. Someday I will, But anyway, so God's people, we practice daily walking and so forth. So third, in paying attention, is everything has a season. Very familiar Ecclesiastes passage, which you all know. And I want to, again, confess that my ministry with you at a 3-year period and then at a 17-year period of 20 years is only a blip in the church's history, okay? I don't have the privilege or the right to write my own history here. None of you have. It's only left up to those who come after us, who either have the joy or the opportunity to do that. So don't think about legacy. Think about love, what you need to do today, because only afterwards can you realize that you have left something that is important for the future. Okay? All right, then same as last Sunday, my fourth point is integrity. And the word integrity is what is integral, right? What is consistent in your life. And again, I want to I can't say it as often as I have, is that living an ethical, moral life is so important. You cannot do something on Sunday and then throw it away on Monday morning when you go outside or go to your workplace, right? God will forgive you, but your friends won't. You got to live in a way that what you say and what you do would be consistent and would have integrity. And I know some of you, Kathy already mentioned to congratulate me on my award that I'm going to be getting in a couple of weeks. And as some of you have read my Facebook post, it's not anything significant. It is just steadfastness. It's to have integrity for the 40 years that I have served the Lord. And FCBC has provided me half of that 40 years of doing what I do, right? In a integral way, right? And isn't that true, right? I mean, all the years that you have known me, do you think that I have been wishy-washy?
He wants to raise our hands?
No. Only those who agree with me. Right? I mean, have I been contradicting myself? I hope not, right? So I think that's what I'm trying to say. And I want to, again, share that having integrity means that you also admit your mistakes. And I have made mistakes here at FCBC. And the one that is very well known is when I left in 1978. That is the biggest mistake I have made in my ministry. And I continue to ask Alwyn Ung to forgive me. And because he said that you were my sister and brother's youth pastor, and then you left me. And so when I came back in 1998, I said to Arlen, I'm not leaving again. And I made a commitment, and so that's why I dedicated all 5 of their kids. See, so I paid back the mistake I'd made. Now, some of you may say, oh, here's a minister who stayed too long, right? No, I had to do that just for Arlen because I told him that I will not leave this time. And that's what I want to confess. Now, I look back at what I was going to say and say, look, has there been one event in my life that has directed where I have been and where I have ended up? And I have to say, and I want to be confessional here because this will lead to life purpose, family history, and final wishes. Again, I don't want to be too too sad about this, but you know, most of you know that I'm the last surviving member of my nuclear family, right? You know, I had 3 brothers; they all passed, and 2 of them, one older and one younger, passed because they had heart attacks, and they were young adults. And then my older brother, who was born in China, came to America with my mother in 1947. He too passed. And then when my mother passed in her 80s, I was the only one left. Okay. So I have to say, although I will never compare myself to the Kennedys, I felt like Ted Kennedy for years because he was left holding the responsibility of keeping the Kennedy family together. So for me, I ask always, why am I alive? Right? I mean, it's kind of was kind of sad, right? You ask that question all the time. Why did this genetic flaw that my 2 brothers had wasn't in my heart, right? So when this happened, I don't know if you guys know, but you know, I've gotten all kinds of heart exams, and my doctor always gives me an EKG, and because they're afraid that I would pass on their watch, right? They always want to pass me, trying to kick the can down to the next doctor, you know. So Dr. Alan Noble, who was my doctor for years since I've been here, finally retired, and he actually said to me at the last meeting, he said, I'm glad that you're still alive and I'm retiring. So he passed it down to this new, young doctor, and I said, I need you, Dr. Noble. And he said, no, I can now retire knowing that you did not pass on my watch. Okay.
Did your siblings live the same lifestyle as you?
Well, it's hard to say because my immediate older brother, who's a year older than me, was pretty driven himself. He passed when he was a freshman at American University at a gym class. But he was already a page for Ed Brooke, who's a senator from Massachusetts. So he was going into politics. And my younger brother died first year, actually in his first year, having finished, having been at Fordham University Law School. He was going to be just as corrupt as Pungo. But you know, see, I mean, we were all entering into professions that we felt, well, it would have been wonderful, right, to have lived, but that's not to be said. But if they were driven, I would think that they must have been, right?
Were they vegetarians?
No. Yeah. My mom always made all kinds of oxtails. So So I want to say a few things about that and then kind of turn it over to you. So, because I'm so driven about who I am and what I want to do, and you know, there's a phrase called ending well. Okay, so some of you are at that stage of life where you want to end well, and then some of you who are still parenting teenagers or young adults or young children, you also have a great opportunity to do that. And so I've been talking to Paley as well as to people like Wes and also Nelson recently about what can we do? So with your support, I've been driven, and I have to say it's been an obsession because while I was working here, I didn't have the time to do what I am able to do and have recently accomplished. So we got our living trust done. Okay, so this is great. I mean, this is like immediate, recent. So like tonight, I'm giving a copy to Lauren and Daniel. And then 2 weeks from now, I will take a copy to Green Lake, Wisconsin, and we have a family reunion. And we will go over the 6 adults and see what the living trust say. Okay, I'm saying this because I'm passing on to you that you gotta be transparent about what your final wishes would be. It's one thing to have it written down, but it's a whole different thing to engage with your children what your wishes would be, because they will hold each other accountable. They'll say, Dad said this, Mom said that. It's very important for me to have that experience. Now, we're not going to talk about this in front of the grandchildren because they think that Joy and I will live forever. And maybe even I would like them to believe that for a while. But that ain't going to be the case. Okay? So the second thing we did is that we bought property finally. Okay, you know, we're transplants. Right? You guys, most of you, if not all of you, grew up in California. Not Sebastian, though. But my family is all in Forest Hills in Boston. All 6 in a row. And when it was time to buy property, they asked if I want one. I said, no, I don't want one. So there's no room for me. So Joy's parents are cremated. They're in a mausoleum in a nice niche in Hawaii. Okay. So just to tell the story again, a good story is worth telling more than often, right? So for the longest time, right, this was a subject that we don't want to talk about. Okay. Joy said, I don't want to be buried and I don't want to be in Boston. And I said, I have no identification with Honolulu. I don't want to be in Hawaii. So what are we going to do? So fortunately, thanks be to FCBC, you didn't fire me. And you kept me here. And thanks be to God that Lauren, as smart as she is, said, let's move where Dad and Mom are so that they could babysit for us. So when grandchildren are born here, then we have set down some roots. So it was only last August, less than a year ago, we decided that we would buy property here. And so now I'm paying the next 18 months payments. So we're going to be at Fernwood in Mill Valley, which is a sustainable green cemetery. So we're in known as Founders Forest, patch of land. And we're going to be cremated and put in a disposable container. And all we get to do is buy a boulder. A boulder, I mean an actual boulder, not a tombstone, a boulder. And then we'll have our names engraved, and that is not going to be like Rolling Stone, okay? It's not going to roll down the hill. They promised us that it's going to be anchored into the ground, okay? But I'll make sure our kids ensure that to happen. And so, it would then be there, and then grasses will grow over. We will be part of the earth. So if you guys want to talk to us about that, we have some pictures and that sort of thing. But it's very different, my friends. And as Paul has said, I do very good funerals, right? And so I've been there many, many times, countless times. And for me and for Joy, we wanted something natural. We want something that did not look like a cemetery. In fact, the Dipsea Trail goes right through the cemetery. It's open 7 days a week. And so you can actually walk or bike through the cemetery and come and visit us.
How can we find you?
You're gonna hump the water.
I'll send you our address. What's that? Okay. In order to carry out all of our final wishes, I used my birthday as a reason to obligate them, namely our children and their grandchildren. So I said, you know, Dad doesn't turn 70 every year. So because I turned 70, I said, look, I will pay for your room and board if you get yourself to Chicago, and we will have a family reunion at Green Lake, Wisconsin, the American Baptist Conference Center. So on June 29th, we're all flying to Chicago. They'll rent 2 vans, and we'll spend a week we rented a house on a lake. Sleeps 14, but there's 12 of us. And at that time, we will talk about all of these things. Our trust, our final resting place, and then family history. So my another project that I have done, and actually I brought a family tree. Maybe I won't have time to share this, but I started in 1996 to obtain from my mother, who was still alive at that time, what she remembered of our history. And then also got from my brother, the one born in China. You know, remember Roots, that Alex Haley's, all right? And at the end, he went back to Africa, and Kuta Kinte was able to recite all of his generations. It ended that way. Well, my brother, who was actually went to school in China, but was somewhat illiterate. He never mastered English. He ended up being a Chinese restaurant cook for the rest of his life. Died of black lung disease, either secondhand smoke or breathing in the evaporated grease. Albie would know this, that stir-fry Chinese restaurants do. In fact, there's a study here in San Francisco, Chinatown, of why so many Chinese restaurant cooks ending up with black lung disease. So my brother Richard died of that. Yeah. So anyway, my point is that Richard, my brother, was able to recite from memory, okay, generations of Ng family. So our grandchildren are the 11th generation of our family. So I'll be sharing that. Joy is going to be sharing her she side of the family, so that our children and our grandchildren and our daughter and son-in-law would also understand all of that. That's again a very important point. And so maybe my oh yes, I got another piece. So in addition to this summer's reunion in the U.S., our son asked if we would make another trip to China. So then next summer, 2020, we're going back to China to do, in addition to the major sites, a visit to George's side of the father's town and back to the Ing village. And so this coming reunion, we will prep the grandchildren what they will expect to see happen. And this is probably true with some of you. Some of our grandchildren don't have Chinese names. So we need to get them Chinese names. And then one of the gifts that we want to provide them is that they will all come home with chops, right? As their kind of gift from us to say that, you know, you're not just an American, but you are a Chinese American. Okay? I think that's also very important. So we are bridge. We are the bridges between the old world in China, our ancestral home, and our new home, right? They call us hyphenated Americans, right? Asian hyphen American, Chinese hyphen American, and on and on. And so unless we do the bridging, we inadvertently, not deliberately, not in a mean way, unless we bridge these legacies and this history, we actually deprive our children from their heritage. And I was just talking to somebody, was it you, Victor, or somebody else? I was just talking to somebody that they realized that there was a lack of information about Chinese American history in their history books. And someone told me that they only had something about the Chinese Exclusion Act, and that was it. And so he said, I need to now compliment all of this lack of education that our children are going through in the public schools. And so I think that's something that I want to, again, pass on to you that's very important. So let me ask you, any comments and questions that you might have? I know I talked more than I did last week, but any comments? How about some of the things I have mentioned of paying attention that we have done, that you have done? Any of that? How many of you have done what I've just said for your own family? George? Yeah?
Some of them.
Okay. Like what? Like the history?
Yeah, the genealogy. We go
Genealogy?
back 20-something generations.
Okay.
I can't recite it, but
Okay. So, but how did you get that? From your
relatives in China.
relatives in China? But you did the research. Was it you or someone else?
No, they gave it to me.
Oh, they gave it to
I
you.
had to learn it.
Okay. But because you can read Chinese, you can read most of it, right?
No,
Oh.
some of it's pretty complicated.
So it's complicated. How about the rest of you?
Because, it branches out to many families.
Okay.
So, just like Abraham, brothers and sisters.
Okay, well,
No,
maybe.
it's a book. It's a book.
Okay.
Yeah.
We don't have a book.
No.
Yeah. We have to make it. Yes, shoot.
You know, the relative in China, whoever that lives there, have some relative there. They could always, they have a book in each village.
Family
They trace,
hall?
they trace back to 22. Like me, I asked them to send me the family book. They had it for me. It had the Wongs have to go back to 25. My sons will be 26 generation. They had all listed
Wow.
that. They have Chinese name listed that, and then the husband and wife, and then the children, and then the children to the next. Like breakdown. They have all these detail in a book lined up for you, and you can trace to who your father, or your grandfather was, like that. Every single one, the village, they still have it now, but I don't know about, next 2 more generations, still they kept those books in the village. So you guys can ask any relative, your last names, Wong, Lo, Lee, they will send it to you, and then you could just trace back, you know, your father's name or your grandfather's name, and then you could see how the history goes.
Well, Joy went back in 2006, right?
To China, yeah.
To China.
To my
And you
father's.
want to share your visit to that town hall? Yeah.
Yeah, well, it wasn't a town hall in the
Family
family
hall, I
home.
mean.
The family home has a hall of ancestors, and the house was built in 1647 by the third generation to have come from further north. This is my father's side, and so I was able to see. They look like pictures. It looks like paintings of my great-grandparents. And all my uncles, and of course only the men. The one auntie that was there was because she never married, so, but it was really cool.
Anyone else? Yes, Carolyn.
It's very complicated to do a family tree. But just on my last trip to Texas, I think my son became interested and started asking about ancestors. And I was, from what I had, I could have pieced my parents, their siblings. It just got very complicated. But then I took it down to Fred and me, and then our children and their children. So it kind of looked like that. And I did a Post-it notes. So the whole wall was full of Post-it notes. So it was kind of like this, and like this, and like this. And Karis was 9 years old. I said, Karis, this is our family tree. She said, I don't see a tree. So I realized that it was just too big for her at 8 years old to realize. So I took everything away. And I did Karis and her two brothers became the trunk of the tree. And it was Fred and me, and then her grandparents. And then she stepped back, oh, I see a tree. So it's complicated. And I've tried many times to start a family tree. This kind of got bogged down.
Okay, I saw in my hand, Wes, and I'm gonna share our family tree and respond to that. Yes, Wes?
Well, as many of you know, we have an annual family picnic every July. And the family's been working on a family tree for probably the last 25 years. And my niece Angela is really into it, and of course Gordon was very into it. And so it's very, very extensive. It covers my grandfather's 5 siblings, and then it goes back from there and then comes down. And then when we went back to the village hall back in 2001, I think we were able to trace it back to the Sung dynasty. So all we have to do is get it on paper, and so the project is to get it into a book form.
Okay, so I know our time is racing. As I mentioned, in 1996, I tried to get as much information from my mother and my brother, realizing that they were getting older. And so I created a family tree by hand and started to tape sheets of paper together because, they, like you said, it starts to really expand. And so not our children as much as my cousin's children started to say, Uncle Donald, when are you finishing the family tree? Because my cousin's children started to have their own children. And so then I felt, again, a burden that I need to do something because I was the one who had the most information and probably have the most memory of who's who. And so, again, like what Wes said and what Carolyn was bemoaning is that you cannot do it by hand anymore because it's just too involved. So I started going online about half a year ago and started to try out these free family tree apps. Oh, here's the.
Fire drill,
Okay.
for the church.
So I just keep on going?
Yeah, keep
Okay.
going.
And I try to find one that has both English and Chinese. At this point, even consulting with Wendy Lin, she does not know of a software that could do that. What I have started to use is myheritage.com. And you can either do it in English or in Chinese, but not both, as well as perhaps 20 other languages. And so what Wendy has done for us is that I have created a family tree, but she has to manually enter the character's name. All right. And so we have now a family tree that's online, and I have shared it with all the adults in our family, not the children, and leaving it up to the adults, even to their young adult children, if they want to start sharing it. And so this is what I have done, and so let me share with you what it looks like. Maybe Joy can come and help me.
Before, I think
Joe.
we need to mention about what we decided about where the plaque on your mother's.
Oh yeah, I'll talk about that. So this is without the Chinese characters, without the pictures of it says that Hao Den Ying family tree in the middle. Chris, come in and hold this for me. And let me just point out. What I wanted to achieve is that when our grandchildren want to know where they fit in, here is my name and Joy's name, and here's Greg, Heather, Lauren, and Daniel, and then their 3 children each. And this printout, it comes in a variety of printouts. You can decide whether you want this or that. This only shows names, connections, and their birth year. And so this has about 170 names on it. But what I really wanted to point out is that my great-grandfather married twice. He had 2 wives at the same time. His first wife had 2 sons, Seltoon, Gaptoon, and then he married his second wife and had my father and also this first son. And so it got pretty complicated because what I remember as a child is that who is this guy, Nguyen Go, older brother named Nguyen. He is from my great-grandfather's first wife. And then there is this Chuck Suk and Set Suk. Set Suk was famous because he was a translator at the United Nations. So when I was growing up, we would get to sit at the Security Council on Saturday when it was not in session. And I said, where is Set Suk? Well, Set Suk is here too. All the way back to Hao Den. And then when my grandfather married again, his second wife is here because I grew up with Aunt Linda in Philadelphia, and she married David Mark, and so her family is here. So my point is that it didn't take that long to do this, really, and but it gives you really a wonderful depiction of the relationship that people have, and. In November of this year, my uncle, this is Uncle Albert, he and my father came to America in 1930 to continue the laundry business that my grandfather started in Boston. So Uncle Albert's oldest daughter, Ruth, and her husband, Bob, is celebrating their 50th anniversary. And I said to Joy, we gotta go, right? You know, there's not gonna be another opportunity. And so from now until November, I am encouraging my family, particularly on this side, to add to the family tree. And then I will probably print this out with your pictures, go to Kinko someplace and pay an arm and a leg, print it out, cover a wall, and then have people find themselves on the family tree. So, yes?
We're done. The fire drill's over. I just wanted to make the
Okay.
announcement.
So anyway, so this is something that I've been working on, and I thought that it's kind of a dramatic. This took 21 sheets of paper. If I printed the Chinese character and the pictures, it would take 70 sheets of paper to create this. So good luck to the Chan family, because you guys are huge. Okay, you can roll it up for me. Thank you. Joy mentioned something, and I'm sorry I've taken almost all the time, that I should probably say. You know, the reason why we were so conflicted about our eternal resting place, buying property, is because I said some years ago, for a distraught Bostonian who never saw the Patriots win the Super Bowl or the Red Sox win the World Series, that I said, if the Red Sox win the World Series within my lifetime, you have to bury me back in Boston. Thinking that they will never win during my lifetime. Okay? But because they have won, and she said yes, you see, for 86 years, men and women have grown up and died and never have seen the Red Sox win. Okay. So because of that, we created a kind of a win-lose type of situation. So what we decided is that while we will be buried, or our remains will be in Mill Valley, I have put in my final wishes, and I bought a copy. This is a Episcopal resource. Oh, thank you. Where you can, I'm sure Joy can even get copies, but this is the Morehouse one. But written here was my first draft, but this kind of instrument helps you to think through what you want to do. But what we plan to do now is that while my three brothers, my parents, and eventually my sister-in-law will all be buried in a row, I want, if George survives me or our children, is to put a plaque on my mother's grave to say that Joseph and Li Ying had 4 sons, and the 4th son is buried in California. And that is my wish, you see. So I'm saying all this because, you see, it's so important to do the stuff that only you can do and not leave it up to your children to figure it out.
You know, Don, if you're going to be cremated, you could have a little of these there. I mean, come on.
When I rise from the grave and when Jesus returns, I don't want to have any missing parts. So I am sorry I took all the time. It's okay. All right, this became kind of a lecture, but let me just say that if you want to look at what it says about your story, my point here is that, and this is actually appropriate. I did know it was Pentecost today, and that's why I did pick this passage on Acts 2, that when the new church got organized, they learned together, broke bread together, fellowship together. And so what I challenge you is that in addition to what you do on Sunday, what do you do in regards to rituals and practices on the other days of the week that you are paying attention to God? Okay? And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
So let me close in prayer. Lord God, we give thanks for this day, every day, that we're able to pay attention to your creation and to your wonder and to your revelation and to your presence, and to know and to acknowledge that you are with us. Lord God, you continue to bless us, and we are thankful for that. We ask that you give us the ability and the courage to discern your will, not just for kingdom work, but also very specifically to end well, finish well about who we are as your creation. So thank you, God, for these times that we have shared and learned from one another. We pray in Christ, who is our Redeemer and Savior. Amen.